How dare you talk about my husband like that? You should be ashamed of
Her
yourself!
voice thundered through the air like a whip, slicing the silence of the grand ballroom into pieces. And then it happened, the moment that would be replayed across phones, across tabloids, across the world. She raised her hand and struck with arrogance, the sound of the slap landing against Julie's face echoing so loudly it felt like the chandeliers themselves trembled. The billionaire's black wife had just been slapped in public, in front of cameras, in front of dignitaries, in front of the very world that both adored and envied her. The room gasped in unison, some covering their mouths, others already lifting phones to capture the scandal that would become headline news. But what the woman who dared to strike Julie did not realize was that this night would not end the way she imagined. Because within minutes, the very woman she tried to humiliate would rise higher, stronger, untouchable, while she herself would be dragged into the depths of shame, forced to her knees, begging for mercy she did not deserve. Before we dive into this storm of pride, envy, and ultimate reversal, stop what you're doing right now and hit subscribe. Tap the bell so you never miss a story like this again. Smash the like button and comment where you are watching from, because this is more than just a story. It's a warning, a mirror, and a wake-up call about dignity, grace, and the heavy price of arrogance. Julie, her name was Julie, and on that night, under the glittering chandeliers and golden ceilings of the city's grandest ballroom, she stood as a vision of elegance and resilience. Her deep brown skin glowed under the lights, her natural curls framing a face carved by both struggle and triumph. She was not just the wife of a billionaire, she was a force in her own right. A philanthropist, an advocate, a woman who had turned scars into symbols of strength. Wherever she walked, heads turned not simply for her beauty, but because her presence demanded respect. The gala was the kind of event that defined society's elite. Marble floors reflected gowns of silk, and tuxedos of fine tailoring. Crystal chandeliers cast glittering rainbows across glasses filled with champagne. Laughter floated over the sound of a string quartet. Billionaires, celebrities, and politicians moved through the hall like pieces in a grand game of status. And at the center of it all stood Julie and her husband, a man whose wealth was matched only by his admiration for the woman at his side. They were the power couple, the embodiment of influence and elegance. But in every room where greatness shines, envy lingers in the shadows. And tonight, envy burned hot in the heart of one woman. She had arrived dressed in arrogance, cloaked in entitlement, a woman who believed her last name was enough to command the world. She had watched Julie all evening, her jaw tight with disdain, her smile a mask barely concealing the bitterness underneath. Every compliment Julie received was a dagger in her chest. Every flash of a camera on Julie's gown was salt in her wounds. And as the night unfolded, her envy grew close. Julie did not notice at first. She was too busy carrying herself with quiet dignity, her focus on the causes she supported, the people she uplifted. She smiled politely, spoke with warmth, exuded grace. But her poise, her composure, her unshakable presence, that was precisely what drove the other woman mad. Envy does not need reason. It needs only fuel. And Julie's very existence was fuel enough. It started with whispers, a muttered insult masked as a laugh. A comment meant to slice. Eyes rolled, lips tightened. Julie, unbothered, stood as she always did, above it, beyond it. But grace has a way of becoming gasoline to the fire of envy. And soon, the whispers turned into venom. The woman stepped forward. Her heels struck the marble like war drums. Her voice cut through the music, sharp and seething. She poured venom into the air, words designed to humiliate, to wound, to strip Julie of her dignity in front of the crowd. But Julie did not respond in kind. She stood her ground, calm, poised, her silence more powerful than any insult could be. And that silence broke the envious woman. In her arrogance, she raised her voice higher. And then her hand, the slap landed. The sound cracked through the room, louder than music, louder than chatter, louder than reason itself. Time froze. Faces turned. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Julie's face tilted slightly from the force, but she did not stagger. She did not fall. She did not crumble. She simply stood tall, radiant, her dignity untouched. But the one who had struck her, she thought she had won. She thought she had claimed the upper hand, that she had stripped Julie of respect. But in reality, she had written her own downfall. Because the room, the crowd, the world that did not see power in the slap. It saw desperation. It saw arrogance. It saw ugliness exposed. And in that moment, the balance shifted. Julie's husband did not explode in rage. He did not shout. He did not move recklessly. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the cameras, toward the reporters, toward the witnesses who would carry this story into every home by morning. He knew power was not in shouting, it was in silence, in control, in the weight of reputation. And he had both. The organizers stepped in, trying to defuse the scene, but the damage was done. The slap had already traveled beyond those walls, already captured in hundreds of videos, already whispered across thousands of messages. The woman who thought she could embarrass Julie had, in one moment, embarrassed herself before the entire world. And soon the consequences came crashing down. Her name was dragged through headlines, not for power, but for disgrace. Her reputation crumbled as sponsors pulled away, as invitations disappeared, as her social standing collapsed beneath her feet. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with such scandal. The very circles she believed she owned turned cold, doors slamming shut, whispers turning into condemnation. She had struck a woman she could never touch. Julie, however, rose higher. The world rallied to her side. Hashtags trended in her name. Strangers poured love and support across social platforms. Leaders and celebrities issued statements condemning the act and praising Julie's strength. What was meant to humiliate her had only amplified her grace. She became a symbol not of wealth, not of status, but of resilience, of dignity under attack, of strength that could not be slapped away. And the woman who struck her. Soon she was on her knees, literally, in private meetings and desperate phone calls and tear-stained letters. She begged for forgiveness. She begged Julie to save her from the ruin she had caused herself. The pride that once dripped from her words was gone, replaced by trembling, by fear, by the suffocating weight of consequences she could not escape. Julie, in her wisdom, did not gloat. She did not mock. She simply carried herself as she always had, with grace. But her silence, her refusal to bow to arrogance, her strength in the face of humiliation, that was the ultimate revenge. Because forgiveness was hers to give, and mercy was hers to hold. The one who thought she had power had lost it all. And Julie, she stood untouchable. Never mistake silence for weakness. Never mistake grace for surrender. And never mistake kindness for lack of power. Julie's story is proof that dignity cannot be destroyed by envy, that arrogance always collapses under its own weight, and that those who rise against grace always fall the hardest. So if you've watched to this point, let this story be your reminder. Carry yourself with dignity, no matter who tries to pull you down. Because in the end, arrogance will always destroy itself, while grace will always rise. Thank you for watching. Smash that like button if you felt Julie's strength. Drop a comment saying I stand with Julie so she knows the world is behind her. And don't forget, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because more stories of resilience, justice, and power are coming your way. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next.